at some point, he makes himself known to every person. Peter, John, and I were talking last night quite at length about what he's being taught at school there presently concerning evolution in one of his classes. And I said, Peter, look, the bottom line is this. Romans chapter 1 says why people worship creation instead of the Creator. It says because when they knew about God, they honored him not as God, neither were they thankful. But professing themselves to be wise, they became as fools. Suppressing the truth, they became as fools, and worshiped and served creation more than the Creator. Therefore, God gave them over to their unclean desires. Listen carefully. The bottom line in the whole discussion of evolution is this. Every man, Romans 1 says, knows intuitively, instinctively that there is a God. Every single person who has ever lived on the face of this planet. That's why in every culture, in every age, people have always worshiped. Dogs don't worship, cows don't worship, ants don't worship. Man worships because man is made in the image of God as a spiritual being, and intuitively he knows there's something greater than himself. And Romans 1 says that's inside of every man, and the invisible attributes of God are seen in creation round about man. The heavens declare the glory of God. Creation declares that there's a master maker, a divine designer. And I said, Peter, just ask your teachers, tell the kids, where did all this come from? Well, it evolved. From what? Well, from some plasma that was struck by lightning and suddenly it took on life. Some soup. When I was single, I cooked some soup that almost took on life, but and I said, Peter, now ask them though, where did that first cell or that first soupy stuff or whatever they're saying, where did that come from? Where did the first atom come from? The first subatomic particle, the first quark. Where did the first smallest particle begin? And then say, God. In the beginning, God. And the skeptics will say, well, where did God come from? Oh, I've heard that so often in this line of thinking. You say, well, even if for the sake of argument we say that evolution is, where did it all begin? It had to begin somewhere. And I suggest to you, just for the sake of argument, the beginning had to be something greater. It had to be God. Somebody had to start the process initially. Well, who made God? I said, that's God's problem. You know, if somebody made God, then our God is responsible to that God. That's his problem. But you are still responsible to the God that started this whole thing, you see. Now we know that, don't misunderstand it, we know that God is, and there is no one else but. Yet, for the sake of argument, I said, Peter, John, just tell them. If they throw that at you, just say, well, that's God's problem to answer to his Creator. But I still have to answer to the one that started all of this. Bottom line is this. Romans 1 says, without excuse, every man instinctively and observationally knows there's a God. But what do? They suppress the truth. Why? That they might worship creation. If they worship creation, evolution, then a person is justified. If I came from a gorilla, I can act like a gorilla. If I came from an animal, I can be a party animal. That's the whole issue. The whole issue is simply this. The truth has been suppressed, and professing themselves, I like that word, professing. I've used that with some professors. Professing to be wise, they became as fools, that they might give themselves over to their lusts. You see, if there's no God, if my theory says there's no God, then I can live like a hog. But the problem is you'll die like a dog. Life will become miserable to you presently, and you'll be damned eternally. That's the tragedy of it. Evolution, gang, the issue is not science. The issue is people don't want to admit there's a creator, because if there is a creator, they are accountable to that creator, and people want to sin. So they conveniently, illogically, unscientifically suppress the truth that they can say, hey, we're animals, let's party. That's the issue. But the blindest of men, at some point, will realize the truth in their hearts, and then they must decide. No man will say in that day, I never knew. I never heard. I had no idea. John 1, verse 9 says, he is the light that lights every man who comes into the world.